Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, what we're doing is we're continuing with our series of shirim, entering the Sea of Wisdom, based on the teachings of the Tzaddik and the Gaon Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern Shlita. And the schus is to do it in person, panim el panim, but the ikr is to tap into the Torah of the Tzaddik and to really be nimshach acher tzaddik. The fact that there are Torahs that come down from tzaddikim, where, you have to believe that tzaddik brought down that Torah, and through the Torah you connect to the tzaddik. Here we have a unique opportunity to not only learn the Torahs of a tzaddik who brought down those Torahs, but we have the ability to be makusha to that tzaddik in our own lives, still alive, Yamim al Yamim Melech Toisiv. So it's a special thing to be able to learn the Torah of a living tzaddik, where there could be a yichud of not only the teachings, but the panim of a tzaddik as well. Because ultimately you can learn the svarim all day long of any tzaddik, and you could come to a place of understanding, or theoretical understanding, and then when you encounter the panim of a tzaddik or the panim of a rebbe, so there's something contained within the face of a tzaddik or a rebbe that is an irreducible kernel of unknowability, right? The recognition that in the end of the day I can know all of the Torahs, I can know all of the ideas, but when the face is present, a person comes to realize that all of the Torah and all of the ideas are simply a hakdama to embrace that which is unknowable. The same thing with our entire Torah. Torah Hashem Tamima, every aspect of the Torah HaKadosha is there not to bring us to a place of absolute knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because one cannot have any absolute knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, really anything, let alone HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the Torah is a sulam hamutz of arzo, rosha megia shemaima, to let us go along every rung of the Torah, to play around in the world of understanding, to ultimately take that last leap after the end of the ladder into a place of not understanding. Moshe nigash el ha'arfel kisham hu elikim. Right, on Har Sinai, at the apex, what we encounter is the anan, the cloud of unknowing, so to speak, where we come in contact once again with the fact that we don't know much. What we're going to see from the Rebbe now, and again, we're using the Ma'ayanos Hayam Kuntris, which is a relatively new weekly printout, unlike the older Kuntresim of the Eichach Malanafshacha. These are different chevra, same base medrash, different chevra, who are orienting the Rebbe's Torah in a little bit more of a concise way. So instead of like the 91 pages that you got on Erev Shabbos, you're getting kind of like 7 pages of a tamsitz. But ultimately, we know a Klal Gadol from the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh in the name of the Rambam that hatoifes chelek min ha'etzem toifes etz ha'etzem kula. Somebody who touches a part of the essence is in truth grasping the entirety of the essence. So really, wherever you enter in, whether it be one word of Torah, you're really grasping the entirety of the Torah. As Rabbi Nachman Schusya Gemelinu writes in Sefer Hamidos in Erech Limud HaTorah, and Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman brings down in the Hakdama to Koich Ve'or, to be masbir, the segula of the Torah, where Rabbi Nachman writes as follows: Kol mishpat v'mishpat medivrei Torah, hi hatzlachas hanefesh atzmo. That every sentence of Torah, or every idea of Torah, is in and of itself the redemption of the soul. Meaning to say, we have to break free of the notion that learning is for the sake of then applying it in some way that will eventually lead to a further knowledge, and that the beginning of learning is simply a step along a process. That's true also, but what's also true and not often known to us is that each and every word of Torah that a person learns contains the entirety of existence within it. As the Gra said in his biur on Mishnayos Peah in Shnois Eliyahu, that every word of Torah is a kiyum mitzvah b'fnei atzmo. And that's actually what we're going to see in the Rebbe's writing. So not only is that the hakdama to the nature of this new type of writing, Lav Dafka will always be rooted in this, but it's also an introduction to what the Rebbe is going to be describing. This, if one can say this, and you can say this in nearly every place, but this touches the core of really what the Rebbe's mahalach is, which is based on Rabbi Nachman's mahalach, which is that in the end of the day, there is quite literally nothing better than learning Torah, not only on a psychological, religious way, but also in terms of what we can do for the purpose of cleaving to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That the Torah is the ultimate path, it's the ultimate space where we encounter God. As the Baal Tanya points out in Parak Daled, there is a yichud nifla, a wondrous unification that takes place when a person studies the Torah, in the sense that the mind is both surrounding and surrounded by the idea of Torah. The idea of Torah is mislabish in my mind, so my mind is processing the Torah, but at the same time, the aspect of the Torah, or that idea, is surrounding my mind, so I'm surrounded by it and filled by it at the same point, which the Baal Tanya refers to as a yichud nifla, that I'm connected to the Torah in a way that I can't really connect to nearly anything else. But again, it's important to keep in mind, as Rabbi Nachman teaches us over and over, that one of the chidushim of Rabbi Nachman is that for Rabbi Nachman, the shayrish of the Torah is tefillah. Not only is the goal to transform every Torah that one learns into a tefillah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as Rabbi Nassan does for us, or gives us good example of in Likutei Tfilos, really as David Malka Mashiach did, but the source of the Torah is the space of tefillah. U'ma'ayan Beis Hashem. The ma'ayan that emerges out of the Beis Hashem is the tefillah that gives birth to the Torah, which means to say that the highest thing is to take the Torah and to allow the Torah to become a tefillah. But the only way to do that is by throwing ourselves into the Torah and believing in the power of each and every word in the Torah. Zak the Rebbe. So this is a drasha. I don't know exactly which year it was from, which is unfortunate. Usually they write the years. This week they did not. But suffice it to say, it's a drasha on Parshas Yisro. In these days where we are meritorious to receive the Torah once again, right? Parshas Yisro, Kabbalah Satira is not simply a remembrance of Kabbalah Satira, but it's a hisayrus of Kabbalah Satira once again. As the Baal Tanya taught us to live with the times, meaning to say, Parshas Yisro is a re-encountering of Kabbalah Satorah in our own experiences in real time. So we're receiving the Torah again. Tzrichim anu ladas. What a person needs to understand is ki avshe bar einu yisbarach oyev lishmaya kol rina satayra hakadosh b'chol derech v'oifen shalom nimo. So that yes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves to hear the voice and the song of Torah in its holiness in any which way that a person decides to learn it. Ulam, however, shleimus kabbalah satayra be'emes, the fullness of the reception of the Torah, he dafke beoifen shemedavik atzmo el noisen haTorah b'shas limudo, is when a person is connecting themselves to the giver of the Torah in the very same moment that they are studying the Torah. So not chas v'shalom to come and be mafrid the noisen haTorah from the Torah itself. V'Hashem Yisbarach ohev biyoser haTorah shenomedes beruach chayim. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants most is a living Torah, a Torah that is filled with a breath of life and that fills us with a breath of life. This is already a klal gadol. The Maharal brings down in the introduction to Tiferes Yisrael a radical notion where some people wanted to say that it wasn't necessarily from the Maharal, that what does it mean shelo birchu birchas haTorah b'tchila? What does it mean that Bnei Yisrael were exiled because they did not make birchas haTorah before they learned? The issue was that the Talmidei Chachamim loved the Torah too much. They loved the Torah more than they loved God. So they were learning the Torah for the sake of the Torah's sake without attaching it back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, shelo birchu birchas haTorah b'tchila means that they didn't focus nearly enough, as the Bach points out, by the Hilchos birchas haTorah. They did not spend nearly enough time focusing on the Noisen HaTorah. Instead, they received the Torah itself, which is arguably theoretically a good mistake to make, to love the Torah too much. But what we see from Maharal is that a person can come to love the Torah too much. I remember in St. Louis when I was giving a Shavuot shir in the Aguda there, which was a wonderful, wonderful place. But they asked for, it was when I thought like radical shir titles were the way to go. So the shir title was The Problem with Learning Torah. Right, so the problem with learning Torah is that you could come to love the Torah too much. Ad kedei kach that Rav Tzadok HaKohen MeLublin brings down in the name of Rav Pinchas Karitzer that in olden days when there was not a lot of learning Torah, there was a lot of Yiras Shamayim. But nowadays when there's a lot of Limud HaTorah, there's less Yiras Shamayim. They went crazy. They said this was a ziyuf. Somebody added this into Rav Pinchas Karitzer's writings. It's not possible that a tzaddik would say such a thing, but be'emes it was said, because the idea is that yes, anything that's disconnected from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no matter how holy it is, loses its value, or its essential value. So what the Rebbe is pointing out here is to learn the Torah, but with an eye at the very same moment on the Yichud HaNifla, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is breathing life into the Torah at every second. Ki hine Yehudi tzarech lehischaber ulehiskasher leTorah HaKadosha be'oifen shemishtoikek lilmoid Torah b'li sof. When a person is learning Torah, the desire that is awoken within the heart at that moment is a desire to never stop learning Torah. It's a mayim shel ein lehem sof. Sherotza lizkois lemadregos re'iyas haTorah hakadosha. A person has an inherent desire to move beyond learning the Torah to seeing the Torah. Seeing in the sense of tachazi, not the tashma of Talmud Bavli, but the tachazi of the Zohar HaKadosh, where it becomes a experiential experience. It becomes a moment where I am subsumed by and overwhelmed by the Torah, as opposed to having some shlita over the Torah in the sense that I understand it. The word understand means to stand under something, ki'ilu I have some sort of control over it. Re'iyas HaTorah is being so overwhelmed by the vastness of the Torah that it just becomes a field of vision, and my eyes become eyes of Torah. Ulam tzarech gam shia loy hishtoikikus v'chashka gedoyla l'das kol ha-Torah HaKadosha k'dei lizkois lahasig godol ha'or hamufla da ha-Torah HaKadosha b'b'chinas ha'or de la'asid. Aside from the fact that we have to desire to see the Torah, to learn the entirety of the Torah, to never let go of the Torah, we also have to learn the Torah with the recognition that it's also for the purpose of preparing myself to be zoiche, to taste from the wondrous light of the future, which is hidden within the Torah itself. Like we know from the tzaddikim, the talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov, that the Or HaGanaz, where is it Ganaz? It was Ganaz within the Torah itself, within the Lamed Vav Mesechtos of Shas. A person is not learning just for the sake of knowledge. A person is learning with the pulsation of breath that exists within the Torah itself, which is the godly and divine light that saturates the Torah. It doesn't mean that a single line of the Torah changes, God forbid, or a single halacha in the Torah changes, or a Mishnah or a Gemara. It all remains the same, but the letters begin to break down to reveal the splinters of infinite light that shine forth from them. Shemar bin biyadiyas haTorah kein tzarich laharbois lavo yoser v'yoser laruach hachayim shebasech haTorah. And in direct correlation to the amount of Torah we learn, we have to spend as much time contemplating the divine light that saturates the Torah itself, so that the love of the Torah never outweigh the love of the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that exists within the Torah. The tzaddikim don't think for a second. The tzaddikim weren't stopping to learn Torah. The tzaddikim were bekiyim in the entirety of the Torah, in all of its chalakim, b'Tanach, b'Mishnah, b'Bavli, Yerushalmi, Shulchan Aruch, b'Poskim. As we know, we know this explicitly from Rabbi Nachman, all the tzaddikim, Rabbi Nachman's requirements for us to learn. I think the joke is that if you learn through Sichas Haran and you follow the Mahalach Maharash, Zchus Hagan Aleinu, whose yahrzeit it was last week, he wrote a book about how, Mahalach and how to learn Torah. I know Rav Kivak does that as well now. But the Mahalach of Rabbeinu in terms of learning Torah is that there's more Torah to learn than the day allows, right? There's actually more content than the hours of the day would allow. So there's no question here as to the absolute necessity to be yored into the depths of every element of Torah. And by way of entering into all of the pratim of the Torah, this is how they're zochet to get the upper view of the Torah, where they can look at the Torah as a shetach, they can look at it as a field of vision. Because in truth, when you're able to summarize the Torah by knowing it all and having it in its klaliistic nature, so ultimately it all comes back. It's abstraction and more abstraction and more abstraction. We go from all of the entirety of the Torah and we bring it back to Tanakh, right? This was the avodah of the Vilna Gaon, for example. The Vilna Gaon was interested not so much in learning Achrayim, as we see in the Chazon Ish's letters about the Gra. The Gra argues more on the Shulchan Aruch than he agrees with it sometimes. The Gra was not afraid, because what the Gra's avodah was to abstract back to its original source. So we have the mass expression of the Torah of the Achronim. And then you can go back to the Torah of the Rishonim, and as Rav Chaim Brisker in his Chidushim on the Rambam, the Griz writes in the Hakdama that the Chiddush of his father was that he wrote like a Rishon, in the sense that he wrote very little. In later generations, you have to write a lot to say a little. In previous generations, you would write a little and say a lot. So the more we abstract it back, it becomes more contained within itself. So you go from the entirety of the Torah, then you go to the entirety of the Rishonim, then you go to the Gaonim, and then you go to Shas, and then you go to Mishnah, right? Again, abstracting back up to simpler and simpler postulates. Then to take the Mishnah back into Torah Shebechsav, into Tanakh, which is the avodah of all the tzaddikim. And then to go from Torah Shebechsav into the Aseres HaDibros, and then from the Aseres HaDibros into the Anoichi, and then from the Anoichi into the silent Aleph of Anoichi, which is really the innermost point of the base to the extent that the entirety of the Torah, Kol Torah Kula, is nichlal in one tiny dot, meaning to say that when a person has a klaliistic vision of the Torah, and nowadays it's a little bit easier because we not only do we have the ability to learn, right, in the night Seder, but we also have Svarim that help us, right? Nowadays we have Svarim, Klalim Svarim, that really reveal to us so much of the Torah without having to really be an absolute bucky in it. The Leshem writes that it's okay. He says, don't be amazed by my Bekius, because I'm really just utilizing the Shem and Sasson, who's like an encyclopedia, but I'm not going to quote the encyclopedia, I'm going to quote the content in the encyclopedia. So we all have the ability now to have a little bit more of a generalized re'iyah of the Torah. Ki tzadikim loy loimdim ha-Torah ha-kadosha b'stama. The tzaddikim are not only learning the Torah as if all there is to learn the Torah. Ela loimdim beruach chayim de kedusha. They live and they breathe the Torah, and they uncover the breath within the Torah itself. Ki'ilu, the Torah is breathing different permutations of breath in each and every moment that gives itself over to the tzaddikim. Ki loy daisha adam yilmad ha-Torah ha-kadosha rak l'shem yedias mishum shemargish benafsho she'en lo shleimus yedias ha-Torah. It's not enough to throw oneself into the Torah with self-abandonment because I feel that I'm missing something by not knowing this sugya in the Torah. Ki afsha gamze madrega gedola. Halavai, that should be what keeps us up at night. But in the end of the day, mikol makom ein zu shleimus ha'avoida. This is not the end all be all of avoida. Why? The shleimus ha'avoida hu lehishtoikik ledasis kol ha'Torah kula kedei liskois l'shleimus or ha'Torah kadosha. I want the or of the Torah. The Maharal points out all the time that Torah is melashon ha'ara. Because in truth, the Or HaGanas is what a person is seeking. Sheshleimus Or HaTorah HaKadosha Munach Biyadiyas Kol HaTorah Kula. Avad, I have to know the Torah in order to access the light of the Torah. And anybody who claims they could access the light of the Torah without descending into the particulars of the Torah is misunderstanding. We've seen that try and be done before. The Ikar is to be yored into the pratim of the Torah, but to hold the light of generalized expression that exists within each particular piece of the Torah. Because in truth, lav kol adam zoyka l'kach. Not each and every person merits to grasp the Torah in this way. That most human beings live their lives in a state of post-lapsarian existence where we are divorced and kicked out of the garden, because that's kind of what happened to the individual. Adam Arishon was the neshama koleles, and we live kicked out of the garden. The Tana Debei Eliyahu writes in the beginning of Tana Debei Eliyahu that v'yegarish asa Adam, that it was like somebody who was divorced, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave a get to Adam Arishon as if he was goyreshim, he was a grusha from the Garden of Eden, and most of us live in that post-chet state. We have no access to the Eden of Chachma. We have no access to that vision of the Torah as a field of vision, because it still remains in a state of ayin loira asa, and eye has not beheld it. And a person doesn't know. And a person doesn't have the ability to learn with the deep connectivity, because b'derech klal, either I'm connecting through dveikus to the achdus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or I'm in the world of the prate pratim and dealing with all of the shor shanagach hasapar, or the minutia of halacha. But what the Rebbe is pointing out here, based on all the tzaddikim, is that be'emes, it doesn't have to be a stira. You can be holding in the prate pratim of a sugya while at the same point holding on the other end, or at the very same moment, to the generalized light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that exists underneath, saturating and subsuming all of the separation and the distortion. Most people learn the Torah by way of a lack of warmth, by way of coldness or coldkeit. And they do not see any revelation of godliness. And again, the Rebbe has expressed numerous times that this is still a tremendous thing to do. And we know this is not meant to be marchik, God forbid, any aspect of Limud Torah, but it's meant to reveal to us what the tachlis of Torah is. How does one do this? When a person is engaged in a particular sugya in the Torah, in every sugya there is a part that is known and there is a part that is unknown. In every yediyah ba'alma, there is a yediyah that I can grasp. That's what we refer to as a pinimi. That's mislabesh within me, my neshama, my ruach, my nefesh. Then there's going to be the chelek that is kasher lahasigo, which is going to be the makif, which is going to be the chaya or the yechida or the aspect that I don't have shaykhs to. V'hat tzadik, but the tzadikim b'shasha bala sugya kasha azayhu mizdavik lamala el Hashem yisbarach. When a person encounters a kasha, when a person encounters a difficulty in Shas, in Poiskim, in a Sefer, in the Svarma, the Tzadikim, instead of being overwhelmed by it and trying to break their heads on it, they turn towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that way they receive new moichen me'lamala in order to understand the sugya. Parenthetically, a mice is coming to my mind. Someone just recently told me this, that they were in London, and the Rebbe was younger, Rav Itchemeyer was younger, and they saw Rav Itchemeyer in the back of the Beis Medrash, sobbing b'chiyos that were noiroim, terrifying cries, ad kedei kach that they felt that he had lost somebody close to him. And after kind of examining what was going on, they found out that he was having a hard time understanding a Tosfos. This was what the Rebbe was doing when he was younger. He was crying and breaking himself over and over for the sake of understanding a Tosfos, which is exactly what he's saying here, that a person turns upwards to be mistavik ta'kadosh baruch hu. Every kasha, Rabbi Nachman writes, Kuf, Shin, Yud, Aleph, is an opportunity to be mistavik ta'kadosh baruch hu, because kasha, a difficulty, is also the Rosh Tevos of Shema Hashem koili ekra. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, hear my voice as it cries out to you, meaning every difficulty in a sugya. And again, abstract this content from the Torah and apply it to life as well. Every kushya, because life is a big sugya also, right? And any kushya that a person comes to is an opportunity to reach upwards towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's the crying out itself that is moilid, the new moichin, until a person now has the ability to begin to understand it a little bit more. In the beginning of a person's learning, they connect themselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Before I open up the sugya, I have to remind myself, this is Hashem's Torah, and it's not just Abai and Rava said, but rather, as our Rebbeim told us, right, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu told, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, and this is what Abai says HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. So first we have to be makdim limud HaTorah, with 2 minutes or a minute of contemplation over the Noisen HaTorah, and that's what we start off with. And so too, in every aspect of the limud, a person should take a pause, take 3 seconds and breathe, and remember that there is a gevil, there is a whiteness underneath the letters of the daf, which reminds me of the Or HaLavan, which reminds me of the Luvan HaElyon, which reminds me of the infinitude in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing himself. V'chein b'chol chelek, a person has to connect themselves to the breath, which is the aspect of Elikus. Bechol makom she'eno mevin yodeyahu bebechinas klipa shemastira mimenu advekos. And any encounter with not knowing in the Torah, as the Arizal says, Rav Chaim Vital writes that when the Arizal would study halacha, he would sweat to a point of exhaustion because he said, I am breaking klipos. Every kushya is a klipa that needs to be shattered for the sake of uncovering a hidden truth. Now again, klipa does not mean something negative necessarily. Gimel klipas tameos is something negative. Klipa b'derech klal just means a husk that surrounds something. So a kushya is an ikar chelik of the limud, as we understand, right? As we learn, Rav Hutner says this all over when it comes to Pesach. But nevertheless, it's there to be broken through. It's concealing the light of connectivity. And every kasha in truth is a moment where I can feel that there is a blockage, a separation between me and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lefikach sarichu lehizdavik yoiser v'yoiser b'boiro ulashlik lahavin lahaski b'tayra HaKadosha b'li kisuyim. And at that moment when a person encounters difficulty, the avoida is to throw themselves with even more abandonment towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to desire to understand Hashem without any concealment, not the Torah, but to understand Hashem's ratzon. And it's only through that I'll have the ability to understand the Torah without any of the kisuyim, meaning there'll always be kisuyim, but I'll be able to get rid of some of the kisuyim. And just to go a little bit weiter, v'zehu shleimus kabbalas haTorah be'emes, and this is what it means to truly receive the Torah in truth. Hainu dimedavik atzmo el noisen haTorah b'shas halimud, that I have to learn how to delicately balance these two oppositional ideas. On the one hand, I'm engaged in the detailed, oriented sugya, but in the very same moment, within the details of the sugya, I'm thinking about about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The detail is an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I saw from the Rebbe today also, Achen ata kel mistater, like the Zemer says by Shalashudis. So it turns out you're a God who conceals himself. I'm sorry, I didn't see this from the Rebbe. I saw this from the Rebbe Rashab today. The Rebbe Rashab says, Achen ata kel mistater, the hastara is a gilui of you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meaning you're a God who reveals himself by way of concealment, not a God who is concealed. That's also true sometimes. But the concealment itself is an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So too, the kushios are opportunities for a person to be mistavik to the nois in HaTorah. V'zehu ikr derech. This is the way that the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov learned Torah Lishma. K'maimer HaBaal Shem Tov HaKadosh, like the known teaching of the Baal Shem Tov in Parshas Noach by Amud HaTfila, Ala Kasuv Ba El HaTeva. Hashem tells Noach, come into the Teva. D'chol os v'os b'Torah HaKadosha tzarech lilmoid b'dveikus panimi. I have to break the letter open and allow the infinite light that is hidden within that vessel to shine forth, so that in each and every letter, like Rabbi Nachman said, and like the Gra said, I am mistavik to the entirety of the Torah. Ubeshashem margish benafsho hester v'ha'alama me'or Torah HaKadosha ve'enenu mevina. And when a person finds themselves in a state of concealment from the Torah and they're unable to understand it, azay tzarech lishbor ha'mechitza ula'ayin ba'omek hasugya daika. And it's specifically at that point that a person has to break their minds open to descend down deeper into the sugya. What the Rebbe is going to continue and show, which we're not going to go over tonight, Be'ezras Hashem, the shiurim will be longer than this, but this is true for each and every mishpat of Torah. Each and every sugya is koilel all of the sugyos. Each and every masechta is koilel all of the masechtos. Each and every pasuk is koilel all of the psukim. And yes, a person has to go to each and every pasuk and each and every masechta. But when a person is sitting and learning, what they have to believe is that everything that I possibly need to find is folded into this sugya, this pasuk, this perek, this page in front of me. And when a person learns to learn the Torah in that way, they will naturally begin to see the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the comfort of Emunah burning through the page itself and allowing the Torah and Emunah to be mistavik biyachad be'ezras Hashem.